Hello. Today I want to talk about some of the stories that have caught my eye in the last week or so, but I want to start with one particular story that I referred to last week, and it's a particularly shocking story actually, and concerns a Treasury Minister who I think is very likely to end up having to resign over this issue. Now, I'd found this story about 10 days ago, somewhere on the internet, I don't remember where, and I'd talked about it last week, and I was surprised there was nothing in the press until yesterday when most of the papers had a bit about it, and the BBC had a very prominent story on their news page just for few hours. I spotted it yesterday morning. By lunchtime I think it had gone, but you could still find, if you search the BBC website, you could still find the story. And this is what it said, this story. It said a Labour minister has been named in an investigation into claims her family embezzled up to 3.9 billion from infrastructure projects in Bangladesh. Tulip Siddiq, who as the Treasury's Economic Secretary is responsible for tackling corruption in UK financial markets, is alleged to have brokered a deal with Russia in 2013 that overinflated the price of a new nuclear power plant in Bangladesh. The allegation is part of a wider investigation by Bangladesh's Anti-Corruption Commission into Siddiq's aunt, Sheikh Hasina, who was deposed as Prime Minister of the country in August. Now, The Guardian says this about Tulip's auntie Hasina. It says Hasina's regime was accused of authoritarianism, human rights abuse and rampant corruption, and she and her ministers are now facing an investigation for mass murder and crimes against humanity. An arrest warrant was recently issued for Hasina, who is now living in exile in India and has denied the allegations. And the inquiry into Siddiq is all part of the overall inquiry. Needless to say, everybody's denied everything. The submission to the Anti-Corruption Commission has alleged that Tulip Siddiq was instrumental in managing the affairs and coordinating meetings with Russian government officials to orchestrate the deal, and that Hasina and family members received 30% of the embezzled funds in exchange for their mediation. The deal was signed in the Kremlin in 2013, with photos showing that Siddiq was present, standing alongside Hasina and Vladimir Putin, Russia's president. Siddiq had previously denied any wrongdoing and said that she was present at the signing as part of a family occasion. So presumably what happened was that Auntie Hasina had phoned Tulip and said, "Tulip, dear, I'm going to the Kremlin. It'll be a nice day out. If you want to come along and meet Mr. Putin, and then we're going to have some tea afterwards. It'll be a nice family occasion." Now, in response to these allegations, Keir Starmer's official spokesperson said the Prime Minister has full confidence in Siddiq, and he confirmed that she would be continuing to handle anti-corruption issues. So nothing to see there then. Her parents also, her mother and various other family members are also said to be involved in these deals. Now, it's quite possible that she's telling the truth, that she had nothing to do with it, she didn't know anything about it, and that people are lying when they said that she was involved in negotiating the deal. It could be that it was just a family outing at the Kremlin, but it does seem to smell wrong somehow or other. And if she was in any way involved, if she has received any money or she is due to receive any money from all this, then really her position is totally untenable. So anyway, here are a few more stories that have caught my eye this week. Research from the Centre for Economic Performance found businesses exporting and importing with the EU suffered a sharp and sustained fall in trade from 2021, with the disruption mainly affecting smaller companies. About 16,400 companies halted all exports to the EU after Brexit. Archie Norman, the chairman of Marks and Spencer, he told Channel 4 News that they've had to hire a warehouse in order to store the paperwork needed to export to Ireland. According to the Times newspaper, Keir Starmer wants a new deal with the EU to include food checks, fishing rights, immigration and border controls. But when asked about under-30s travel, he said, "I've been clear from the get-go that freedom of movement is a red line for us, and we have no plans in relation to freedom of movement at any level. In other words, forget it. We've told you what we want, but there's no way we're going to have any exchange of young people." And the extraordinary thing is that, if you're a young person in Korea or Japan or in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, I think also Uruguay now, you can apply to come here, and you can come and you can stay for, I think it's 4 years. And likewise, British young people can go to those countries and stay for a similar period. But we don't want Europeans here. We don't want French people here. Italians. No. They might come. They might claim benefits. They might get a council flat or something. And why is it such this absolute horror of the possibility of Europeans coming here, young European people and our people, the tens of thousands of young British people who might well like to go to live in Europe for a year or two. It's all because of what's the Daily Express going to say if we even consider it. And it's always sort of treated one way, isn't it? It's a question of them. We don't want them coming here. Not so much worried about if we go there. And this is a very shocking story next from Farming UK. And it says that Dover Health Authority sees 6 tons of rotten meat, some from African swine fever affected areas in Romania where there's an epidemic. Dover has seized 147 tonnes in the past year, with only 20% operational coverage at Port of Dover due to budgetary pressures. So presumably, had they had 100% operational coverage, they'd have seized, 700 tonnes of rotten meat? And you think, how is this? How much of this meat is getting in now? Since we've taken back control of our borders, we've got no control at all. Stuff just comes in. There is no control. And how much other stuff is coming in? How many European suppliers are there who've got a whole load of duff meat they can't sell in Europe and think, I'll send it off to the UK? Nobody ever checks anything there. And what happens to this fowl meat, this meat with this, whatever it is, this African swine fever affected? What happens to it? It's not going to go to Waitrose. It's not going to go to Marks and Spencer's or Tesco. It's going to end up in school meals or in hospital meals, or it's going to end up in pies or kebabs or whatever. Somewhere where there's very limited control, where there's somebody on a trading estate cooking mass meals. It's just really really terrifying, and it's so dangerous. And also, of course, without any checks. I mean, I've said this so many times before, but I mean, the smuggling now just be so easy to smuggle anything into this country. Taking back control, you see, control of our borders. That's what it's all about. We must control our borders. You can bring anything in now, just stick it at the back of a lorry and drive it in. Thames Water, one of the companies that's particularly vulnerable because they've dished out all the money in dividends to their shareholders, foreign shareholders mostly. They were fined £18.2 million by Ofwat, and this is for paying what Ofwat described as unjustified dividends to shareholders of £131.3 million. So they paid out £131.3 million. They're tipping excrement into the rivers and the sea, and they've been fined £18.2 million. And to help them pay that fine, Ofwat have agreed to a 35% increase in charges, as has been agreed for all the water companies. You just wonder, you just think, how crazy is this? The shareholders get the payout and the customers pay it. And there's a lady who's the CEO of Severn Trent Water. She's called Liv Garfield. Now, she gets paid more than the Prime Minister. A lot more than the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister gets $160,000 a year. The Prime Minister would have to work for 20 years to earn what she earns in 1 year. £3.2 million she's paying herself for presiding over a water company that's tipping excrement in the rivers because it's more profitable and dishing out all the money to to shareholders. According to the Financial Times, our GDP shrank for the second month in a row in October, and inflation is up to 2.6%, which is the highest in the G7, equal to Japan, admittedly. And the cost of borrowing is going up. It's getting very high, and of course, every time the cost of borrowing goes up, the government has less money to spend on everything else, and so inevitably, if the cost of borrowing continues to increase, then we'll be paying more taxes or more. There'll be more cuts. Now, I did want to just mention one thing which I found, I think, probably the most disgusting thing I've seen for a very, very long time. And this was Boris Johnson giving an interview to New Zealand television. He's at New Zealand pushing his book. And this is the man, remember, who pushed through Brexit in order to advance his own career. A man who's dishonest, incompetent, corrupt, and totally self-obsessed. And this is what he said to New Zealand television in this interview. He said, lots of people are fleeing the UK at the moment. It's very sad. Lots of wealth creators are going to Dubai and Milan. And he said, Milan? Can you believe Milan? Not since the 1970s have I known an emigration problem in the UK where we've had talented people because they didn't want to work in the UK. And you think he's responsible. He's totally responsible. And he's going around the world telling everybody how there's a brain drain. The implication presumably is that it's all down to the government that's now been in office, 6 months or something. A couple other small points. Romania and Bulgaria are going to join Schengen on the 1st of January. And that'll mean that throughout Europe there'll be freedom of movement and relaxation of the passport controls and so on. And the same is going to apply, I think, to Gibraltar, it would appear. There is now nominally, they are nominally members of the Schengen, in as much as the Spanish passing across the border in and out of Spain don't have to even show their passports, whereas if you're British or if you're a Gibraltarian, you have to have your passport stamped every time. I know this for a fact because I happened to be there last week and I crossed the border about 8 times and I've got 16 stamps in my passport. But finally, I wanted to end with a warning, really, and it's this: that as a result of government policies and continue to pursue solid policies of the Conservatives, it's becoming more and more unlikely that we will be able to even apply to rejoin the EU, not for many, many, many years. And there are two specific reasons. The first is that from the 1st of January, that's in 10 days' time, we are joining the CPTPP. As you know, CPTPP is about 12 countries as far away on the planet as you can get without falling off. I mean, we're talking about Chile, and we're talking about Peru, and we're talking about Australia and New Zealand and Vietnam. Anyway, we're joining that group. Once we join that group, it'll then no longer be possible for us to apply to join the EU again, to rejoin the EU, because we'll be part of another group. And it's estimated that membership of CPTPP will lead to an increase of just under 1% of our GDP in 10 years' time, if all goes well. It may not be as much as that. And the second reason why it's going to be almost impossible to rejoin the EU, or to even seek to rejoin the EU, is because of the special economic zones and free ports, which the government are going ahead with. As I've said before, I made another video about these special economic zones and free ports are areas where firms can come and set up, and they don't pay any business rates for 10 years, and they don't pay employers national insurance. So they've got all sorts of financial advantages where rules and regulations are all relaxed. They are famous world over for smuggling, for money laundering, and for various other types of corruption. We're going to have 84 of them all over the country. I mean, a huge part of the economy is going to be these special economic zones. And the idea is to attract companies to go and set up in these zones. And what happens, of course, is that companies who are outside very often are going to move in because they want the tax advantages. So the government will lose a great deal of tax as a result of these economic zones. It's unlikely that they're going to attract much new investment. I don't think many people can say, well, if I can save a bit of money, I'll go and set up a business in an economic zone. It seems the benefits are very questionable, and the negatives are just enormous. But as I say, there are special economic zones within the EU, but they're all extremely tightly regulated. Ours are going to just be free-for-alls. And again, it's just something else to worry about. And finally, the Americans are going to come. I think it's very concerning that Farage and Musk are so close, or that Musk, I think, seems to have taken over the government in America. He's now going to have a stab over here, and for him, it's all just a game. But I think the Americans are going to start moving in and buying up anything that doesn't move, really. And it's all such a, as I always end up saying, it's always such a mess. But anyway, if you've stuck with it this far, thank you very much indeed. And until next time, happy Christmas, and bye for now.